Hello and welcome to the channel where I explore concepts related to creativity and the arts, some basic mental health and wellness, and generally what can we do overall to live fuller, deeper lives. So if that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and subscribe. Today I'm talking about how to increase focus and attention span. So if you've ever had that feeling like, oh, my attention span is getting worse, or you're just curious because you've heard the statistics about how today our attention spans seem to be shrinking, then stick around. I'm going to talk about 5 ways we can go about improving our focus and attention span so we can do better, deeper thinking more often. And I want to start by talking just a little bit about the brain and different ways of thinking and how it rewards us accordingly, how that affects our attention span, and then I'm going to move over and talk about those 5 methods. So here we go. So first of all, in terms of what happens in our brains based on different tasks we do throughout the day, we do get a dopamine kick anytime we finish a task. So you have a project in front of you, you go all the way through it for a couple hours and you get it done, success. That will give you a positive feeling. It's a little reward for getting the task done. And this makes sense because as individuals and as a society, we will never make any progress. Ultimately, we would never even survive if we couldn't finish a task and stay focused on something for more than a few seconds. We also get a dopamine kick for discovering new information. And this also makes sense if you think way back, evolutionarily speaking, because if you're working on a task, let's say you're hunting for berries, you hear a sound, you allow yourself to be distracted and take in the new information and you realize there's a giant cat trying to eat you. That was really important that you changed your focus, take in this new information, and run for the hills. And the reward system in place for when we take in new information is stronger than the one that's in place for rewarding us for finishing a task, which explains why most of the time it's easier for us to do something like scroll our phones than it is to get so focused on a task that we completely lose track of time and miss our other responsibilities. Both can happen, but which one happens more often for more people? So with that in mind, it makes absolute sense that today our attention spans are shrinking because we have such easy access to the new information reward center in our brains. And yes, most of that has to do with our phones. You can get on there and do nothing but learn information constantly. You will not run out of information. It's really fun. And you will be learning too. It's not like there's no value in this. There's a reason we are rewarded for learning new things. It's a good thing to do. It helps us grow. It helps us survive. But obviously, we can go a little too far that way, and suddenly we're losing out on our ability to think really long and really deeply and get really invested in a project or enter this flow state, which is the term becoming more popular now about how to really lock in on a project and block out everything else and just be focused on one thing. It's also important for our relationships. Of course, there have been so many studies on how cell phones can negatively affect our conversations and our relationships. We want someone to have their full attention on us when we're talking to them or having a deep discussion. We want to be able to do the same for other people as well. And so there's a little bit of effort and training we can do, especially today. There are more factors to fight against than there have been in the past. So with that in mind, let's get into these 5 methods for increasing our attention spans and our focus. First one is to avoid multitasking. And that can surprise people because in a lot of ways, there's been this hyper focus on productivity. And so we want to be able to do as many things in a day as possible. So it seems logical that if we could do more than one thing at once, we would be getting more done, we would be making more progress. And the other thing about multitasking is it kind of feels good. But the reason for that is that you're essentially doing that thing where you're taking in new information quickly. That's giving you a little positive reinforcement for this act of multitasking. But scientifically, literally speaking, it is always slower. Let's say you're trying to write an essay and you're having a text conversation with your friend. Every time you go to write your essay, your brain gears up, picks what it's focusing on. Every time you switch your attention over to this conversation with your friend, there's a lot of effort going on in your brain. It takes a lot of work for it to switch gears and focus on this new task. And then you go back to your essay, it's going to take all of that effort again. Simply put, you are taxing your brain unnecessarily. And studies have shown pretty conclusively that if you were to separate them out and take time just to write your essay and then only to talk to your friend, you would do both tasks faster and better because your brain has more energy. It's not using up resources to switch between tasks. You're not getting quite those little kicks from switching between that you would when you are multitasking, and so it doesn't always feel like you're being as productive. And there's even a study that shows that people who believe they're really, really good at multitasking are actually the worst at it. And this is very interesting because it suggests that when your brain is putting in all of this effort to switch between, it might not even be taking the extra space to kind of keep track of time and really logging how much you're achieving in a certain amount of time. So people who feel like they're really good at multitasking, it's almost like their brain is so overwhelmed, it's not even realizing that it's not getting anything done. Whereas if you have the sense that you're like, no, I really can't multitask, it might be that your brain is tracking your lack of progress more efficiently. So multitasking is kind of fun and it's kind of satisfying. There are times where you may choose to do it anyways, or it may be unavoidable, but literally scientifically speaking, it will always slow you down. The importance of focusing on one thing is obviously really necessary for our work if we're trying to be productive and accomplish tasks throughout the day. It's really important in our relationships. It's also really important for our ability to relax and recreate. And I want to do maybe many other videos on this concept, but today, many of us never really recreate actively. Like we think that relaxing is just I do whatever I want, and so most of us will just go for these little dopamine kicks in our brain, which often means something like having a show on while you're scrolling your phone. Again, it's okay, and this is your time off. You can do what you want with it, but you're not engaging in either one deeply. So you're kind of cheating yourself of a deeper experience that you could be having there. So it matters in every part of our lives. Multitasking tends to be something that feels good, but prevents us from having deep thinking and deep experiences. So that first method is to avoid multitasking whenever possible and focus on only one thing at a time. Number two, and this naturally follows right along with it, is to avoid distractions. So if you are trying to focus on one thing, you don't want anything around that is going to pull your brain away from the task you're trying to ask it to do. There have also been studies, or at least one study, and I will link the article I found this in below in the description, saying that even having a cell phone in the room, like it could be on silent, it could be turned face down, but if you have a cell phone in the room, your attention span will go down. Your ability to focus on a task is less. I was surprised to hear this, because I would think, obviously it's distracting if it's turned on and it's going to be pinging, but even having it on the table and not having it turned on can be distracting. In a way, it makes sense because our cell phones in particular can offer us so much easy dopamine, like, ooh, it feels so good. It's almost like giving someone a difficult task, like writing an essay, for instance, or doing some long project at work, and then putting a piece of cake on the table next to them. You probably wouldn't actually eat the cake. Like, even if my phone was on the desk, I probably wouldn't actually get on and start scrolling Instagram. But it's right there and you know you can and you're going to think about it. You don't have to actually engage with it to be distracted by it. And I thought this was fascinating and it actually makes perfect sense. So if you are really serious about limiting distractions, take your phone to another room and leave it on silent and just get it far away from you. But aside from that, and that isn't always feasible, sometimes, we need to be in touch, we need to be more available than that. What are other things we can do, like having a really clean space? That's one for me. If I'm sitting down to do some work, I don't want clutter on the desk. It makes my brain feel tired. I don't often want a lot of background noise, or if I do, I want a specific type. Most of us are familiar with the kind of setting that will help us focus. And this is important because the act of ignoring something that is not the main task we're trying to focus on takes effort. So your brain will get tired out from constantly blocking out some other stimulus in order to focus on the one thing, which is part of why it's literally helpful. It'll be more restful to move your phone away. Because if it gives you something that you would tend to think about, that's effort your brain is putting in. If there's clutter on the table and you're like me and you're going to look at it and want to clean it, it's going to take your brain effort to ignore the desire to clean the desk. On the flip side, I sometimes do my best work in a coffee shop where there is a lot of noise. There's a lot of background noise, there are a lot of people, but it's pretty consistent and it doesn't bother me in any way. Nothing about that is distracting to me, I don't mind. So people have different atmospheres in which they like to focus. There are kind of different ways of being distracted or not, so it kind of depends on yourself and your preferences. But making an effort to remove distractions is very important. That's number 2. Number 3 is to maintain your physical health. And specifically, what keeps coming up is exercise. And if that's not something you have incorporated into your daily life already, I cannot recommend it strongly enough. It makes such a big difference. But very simply put, it's extremely good for your body in so many ways, and your brain is a very big part of your body. And I think a lot of us today are used to thinking of our brains as sort of separate from our bodies. Like we want to just remove the two, and that literally doesn't work. Like it doesn't work. You could be a very brilliant person who never exercises and is not in tune with their body, who doesn't sleep well, that kind of thing, you know, like the mad scientist vibe, where someone's really unhealthy but they're really brilliant. Scientifically, you can guarantee that the unhealth of this person is not making them brilliant. They would probably be more brilliant if they took care of themselves. So again, exercise, of course, it matters if you're sleeping. That's crazy correlation in our ability to focus. Focus takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of effort from our brains. It's crazy to me that we don't understand sleep very well, but there's some very important work that's done when we are unconscious for our brains, and we need to do it. So sleeping well, eating well. If you're having low blood sugar, I can't focus at all if my blood sugar is going down. Nothing will get done. If you're hydrated, all of these things. We want to make sure that we're doing what we can to take care of our physical bodies. It will make a big difference for our brains and our minds and our ability to think and do good work. Number 4, meditation. And this is another one that keeps coming up in so many of the videos that I do. I have a video here on mindfulness, this concept of what it is to live really in the present and not to let ourselves be fixated on the past or anxiously thinking about the future, but just to stay right where we are. How this helps us to be really grounded, present, happy people. So I do recommend that video. It's such a fun concept. And there are different ways we can go about practicing mindfulness, but meditation is a big one. And meditation is particularly apt for focus because it is basically boot camp for your attention span. If you're unfamiliar with meditation, simply put, what you're going to do is find something calming to focus on. So some people will focus on their breath. You can do an imaginary exercise and try to conjure a particular like peaceful scene in your mind. You can, especially if you can go outside, you can spend time focusing on the details of your actual surroundings. Or, and this is my preference, you can take it more to prayer as well and maybe focus on something like a line of scripture. So you find something to focus on. You get yourself be very centered and very calm and peaceful, let go of all of the like stressors and anxieties you've been feeling. And then when your mind wanders off, which it will, you bring it back. And then it'll wander off again, and you bring it back again. And that is how it works. That's pretty much all it is. So if you've never tried meditation, I highly recommend you can start with 1 minute a day. Get a little bit better. It's like exercising a muscle. You can add it to 2 minutes a day. You can go up to 3 or 10 or 20. Some people can meditate for hours. Not me, but it will absolutely improve your attention span. No doubt. Like, no doubt. And it's really good for this kind of deep thinking and helping us get in tune with ourselves. There's so much about it that I love. Cannot recommend enough. Try and get some form of meditation or really focused prayer into your life. And then number 5 is to go out in nature. And again, the research suggests this so strongly that they've even found that looking at a picture of nature will help your brain, which is crazy to me. So if you live in the middle of a city and there's only a concrete jungle everywhere, you can just pull something up on your computer and it will already give you a little bit of that kind of soothing effect. It's like giving your brain a massage. We want to be in nature. We're just creatures of the earth and we want to be outside. So if you can, go for a walk, look at some trees, feel the sunshine. It helps our brains and our beings in a very deep way, and it makes a big difference in our ability to focus and increase our attention spans. So there you have it. Those are 5 big ways we can go about increasing our focus and attention spans. And I love all of these because They will also help us in our daily lives in many other ways. They help to relieve stress and anxiety, to help us be a little bit more in tune with ourselves and our emotions. They help us to live more deeply and to find more joy and energy in our daily lives. So I highly encourage you, if you can, pick something from this list and try and add it into your life daily as a habit. I already know what I'm going to add from this list for my work this week. Hopefully it'll help. I hope you enjoyed this content and found it interesting and useful. I know I enjoy researching it. Go ahead and leave me a comment if you have any thoughts or questions on this topic. Thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you next time.